Up next, we got support, the shotgun class, and first up we got their grenade. This is the frag grenade. This one's okay. It's probably not as good as the grenades that we've talked about so far. I'm going to put it into C tier. It's good for crowd control, and that's about it in the early game. Usually I'm just throwing this into crowds. It doesn't do well against big enemies. It can actually do really high damage, but part of that's from the shrapnel that it throws out, and that's not always the most consistent thing in the world. So C tier. It's also pretty bad for survivalist. I actually rank it even lower for survivalist, probably into D tier, because you don't really want to take this when you have so many other options. You have like meta grenades, or you have nail bombs that do a similar job, or flashbangs. You just have so many better grenades than this one to take for that class. On support, they're fine because you're kind of stuck with it, but nothing really to speak about there. Then we've got our starting weapon. This is the SG500 pump shotgun. This one's fine. I'm going to put it C tier. It does okay damage. It has a slow rate of fire because it is pump action. It kind of reloads somewhat slow. It is quite accurate, and it does scale decently well with upgrades. It also doesn't weigh that much. You're never upset when you pick this up off the ground with really any class, because it can just dome all the small Zeds really quick. Even body shots to regular Zeds often kill them pretty easily. On like survivalist, it's an okay starting weapon if you want to take it. Then we move on to our tier 2s, where we have the HZ12. This one is a pretty interesting shotgun. I'm going to put this one up into B tier. I think it's actually pretty good. It does decent damage per second, okay damage per shot. It's got a weird rate of fire since it's 2 shots and then you pump it. It can be pretty fun. It's pretty cheap and it's pretty cost effective. It's just an all around like pretty nice weapon across the board. So I think it's good in B tier, like just above average. And upgrades actually do help quite a bit. It also doesn't weigh very much at only 5. That's pretty nice. The HZ12 is also a decent option if you want to take it early on for survivalists. Not a bad option, still probably a B tier for them. And then we've got the HRG buckshot. This one's pretty good early on because it's lightweight and it's cheap, probably like B tier as well. Okay damage per shot, okay damage per second. Doesn't really scale well with upgrades, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. When it only weighs 2, you can just throw it onto any loadout. It works as a pretty good off-perk weapon, and it works pretty well on survivalists too because you can still at least have a faster reload. And if you have 2 weight that you need to fill, this is a pretty good option. So yeah, nothing to really complain about there. I like grabbing it early. Dual buckshots on the other hand are pretty bad. They're really not that great. I'm gonna put these ones D tier just because there's not really a reason to go for them for the price. There's better weapons in tier 3. You're going up to 4 weight, so you're not as lightweight as something like the buckshot. And there are other weapons that if you want to take this as an off-perk weapon that weigh around 4 that are just kind of better than it. It doesn't really scale well with upgrades, so upgrading it doesn't help. It's just kind of in an awkward spot, and I don't know how they would really change that other than just like buffing upgrades for it. That would be about my only thing that I could think that would help. Also, whenever you upgrade this, it does upgrade both weapons, so it actually gives you 2 weight every time that you upgrade it, which makes it not really that appealing once you throw some upgrades into it, just because it's not worth the wait. Then we've got the boomstick. Boomstick is an amazing tier 2. I'm going to throw this one right up into S tier. It's one of the best tier 2 weapons in the game. Does high damage per shot, does really well at close range. Once you have choke, it does well at long range too. You can fire out both barrels if you'd like to do really high damage, and you can also fling yourself backwards or fling yourself up, so you can climb over different obstacles in the game. It's really nice. It's really good on survivalists too. I'd probably also put it into A or S tier for them, because if you want an early game shotgun, the boomstick is a really good early game shotgun. I guess we should talk about nail gun too here before I forget. This is another tier 2 option for support, and I'm still probably going to keep it into A tier because I think it's a A tier weapon on support as well. It does good damage per second, super cheap. It's your first semi-auto shotgun, so if you like that, you can get this. You can go with the larger magazine that have a ton of nails with it. You can make it last forever if you just want to set it to single nail at a time. It ricochets, which is great. It also counts as piercing damage, so it's a little bit different than shotgun damage. Good against certain types of enemies. Really nice weapon. I think it's also probably A tier on support, also A tier on survivalist. Doesn't weigh that much, and it's a semi-auto shotgun, so if you want that, it's also really good there. Up next, we got the Dragon's Breath. The Dragon's Breath, I'm going to say on support, is probably like B tier. I think it's pretty good. It actually does good damage per second, leaves floor fires, which is good for clearing up things like crawlers and bloats. You can light enemies on fire, which sometimes causes them to panic. That can be good or bad, depending on what you choose to get to panic. It doesn't scale as well as some of the shotguns with upgrades. It still scales well because it is still a shotgun, so that's all nice. And it does kind of reload a bit slow, but I would consider this an upgrade over the regular pump shotgun. And if you want to take this on survivalist, it's actually really good. It's actually a really good survivalist weapon if you want to take it early on, because the fire is pretty effective. You can have the faster reloads on it. Still does good damage at close and medium range, even out to longer range, it's still pretty good. So everything about it, I'd actually probably put it higher on survivalists, probably up into A tier. I think it's actually really good for them. Then we've got the ballistic bouncer. This is a very weird weapon. This is the HRG version of the mine reconstructor. You make balls on the end of it that fire out and bounce around, and sometimes they do tons of damage, sometimes they don't, sometimes they just knock down enemies. I think it has the same problem like the pulverizer has, where sometimes it'll just overwrite the damage with just the knockdown status effect, so you'll hit something in the head where you would normally kill it because you have way more than enough damage to. It instead just knocks it on the ground, then you gotta shoot it again. And with this, it's really awkward to do that. So this one like fluctuates a lot for me. Either it's amazing or it's very meh. There hasn't really been like an in-between in matches. Can be really fun though. I'm gonna put this one like C tier, I think. C or B tier. It's probably B tier. I think it's a little bit better than the pump shotgun. I think it's better than these other weapons, but not super consistent a lot of the time. Then we've got the M4 shotgun. M4 shotgun is amazing. This one is like a solid A tier. A lot of people would argue it as S tier, and it's really good. Good damage, good spread, very tight spread even without choke, so it's good for long range. Fires fast, does high damage, scales well with upgrades, has a nice sight on it. It's kind of slow on the reload, but that's really its only downside. It's all around just like a very above average gun at everything. It's also really good on survivalists if you want to take it on them. I'd probably say it's A tier as well because it doesn't weigh too much and it hits like a truck. And then we've got the blast brawlers. This is a very weird weapon and not a weapon that I think is that great on support. You can block and parry with it, which is kind of nice, but it's very awkward to use. It weighs a lot, which makes it awkward for upgrades. It doesn't scale well with upgrades. It does okay damage per second and damage per shot. It does have a melee attack, which is kind of nice, but there's a problem with this, and that's the Frostfang exists. And the Frostfang is way better than this weapon. So if you have that DLC, then you're absolutely going to use this. If not, and you're playing the regular base game, then it is your only melee option, so you can block and parry with it for survivalist, for survivalist and for support. I'm going to put this like C tier, like very low C tier, maybe D tier for support. I don't think it's very good at all. On survivalist, though, it actually is pretty good because it does count as a melee weapon, I believe. So you can run faster with it. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm actually not entirely sure now that I say it. But blocking and parrying is better on them, so I would put it up a bit higher. Probably like B tier. It still gets outshined by the Frostfang, and we should probably talk about the Frostfang since it's already up here too. Frostfang is also S tier on support. It's S tier on Berserker, it's S tier on support, it's S tier on Survivalist. It's just an amazing weapon. Even as an off-perk weapon, it's probably like high A tier. You can block and parry with it, you can freeze things with it, you can use the Axe Blade to kill things faster. You can just use the Axe Blade if you run out of ammo, or if you need to take a break to reload a bit, or if you're worried about ammo, you can just clear up smaller guys with it. It's just amazing at everything. It also scales well with upgrades, and just freezing enemies in general is really, really strong, especially if you can freeze a boss. Frostfang's amazing on this class too. Then we have the medic shotgun, which the medic shotgun on support is probably S tier, I would say. It does good damage per second, has a very tight spread. It's semi-automatic with a detachable magazine, so you can reload it super fast. Has good sights, you can heal with it, which is a huge plus since medic weapons just can do that. That's really nice. It's also probably A or S tier on Survivalist as well. I would probably take this over the medic ARs for Survivalist. It weighs a little bit less, it does higher burst damage. The shotgun is really nice. Everything about it's really good. Nothing really to complain about with the medic shotgun. And then we have one of our new weapons. Plus, this is the shock gun. But this is a semi-automatic shotgun that does pretty decent damage per second. Its sights are a little bit weird. It does have a detachable magazine, so you can reload it pretty quick. Secondary fire is strange. It does an AoE zap to everything around you, which puts the EMP status effect on them, but it also does really high damage. It's really good for crowd clear, or if you get surrounded by stuff easily. Very, very strong there. It can also pacify things like the flesh pounds and the scrapes, and then you just spam them to death at very close range with the shotgun. I did have some issues with this where it's not as strong as some of your other weapons, but it works really well in conjunction with any of yours. So I'm going to put this one high A tier. I think it's really good too. And the shotgun is also really good for Survivalist as well. If you want to take it on them, it's actually pretty amazing. I'd probably say it's A tier, maybe S tier on them too. Then we've got the AA-12. The AA-12 I'm also going to put up into S tier for support. It's really strong, does high damage per second. It does weigh a lot, but support doesn't really mind the extra weight. That's kind of nice. Upgrades are kind of whatever for it. This is probably your best like boss killing weapon, besides maybe like the Frostfang, since you can block and parry with it. This is a really good option though, just to spam at a distance. It also has a very tight spread, so you can hit enemies at very long range with it. And even though it only does like the same amount of damage as the pump shotgun right away, it doesn't really matter when this is full auto and has a gigantic drum magazine that you can make even bigger if you'd like. I think you can take it up to like 35 rounds. Doomstick, I'm going to say, is like A tier. I don't think it's as good as the AA-12, but it is still very fun. Weighs a lot, just like the AA-12. You can upgrade it if you would like, which it's okay. It does still have the benefits like the double barrel has, where you can jump up and fire it, and you'll fire out all 4 barrels. This does really high burst damage, but you can run through ammo quickly with it. It does fling you too if you do this, so that's pretty fun. Yeah, Doomstick's just a very fun weapon overall. It's probably one of my favorites, and it's pretty fun to pair with like the AA-12 and just have 2 big heavy guns that just smack around everything. Maybe not the best combination, but a very fun combination for support. Survivalist is okay with the AA-12. They're okay with the Doomstick. They would probably be lower. They'd probably like B tier for both of them, just because you have to invest a lot of money and a lot of weight. So with this, you're probably taking the weapon harness. If not, it's going to be awkward, because then you have like 5 weight left. 4 if you want to upgrade either one of them. Oh, and I missed out on a couple of weapons, actually. We've got 2 more that I forgot were crosswork weapons. First up is the FAMAS Master Key, which I would probably also say is C tier for support. It's awkward. The shotgun on it is basically the standard pump shotgun, and then you get an AR, which sounds like it could be cool for long range, but in this game, shotguns do have really long range, so having a 3-round burst rifle doesn't really matter when you just take the M4 and just snipe things a ways away with it, or take the medic shotgun or the AA-12 and snipe things a ways away with it. So it's probably going to stay in C tier for this. And then we have the Blunderbuss, which is a cross perk between this and Demo. This one, secondary fire, does fire like a shotgun, and it throws out a bunch of shrapnel. This actually does the most damage per shot out of any shotgun in the game, but it does have a very wide spread. It's not super accurate at longer ranges, and its primary fire fires out cannonballs, which are super fun to use, since you can fire them out, hold down the trigger, and they just smack into stuff, and then you can release the trigger and cause them to explode wherever they are. I really like that. It does give you some option for explosives and for crowd clear, but usually don't need that with support, so it's decent on them. I'd probably put this one up in the B tier.